With the regular season over and the postseason well underway, it's a good time to do some regular season rankings. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be taking a look at the best player from every position in 2022. And with these rankings, we're just looking at the regular season and just 2022. So we're pretty much going to be looking at who had the best regular season of 2022 at each and every position. So with that in mind, let's get right into the video. Getting things started off at the catcher position, I have JT Realmuto. Realmuto has been for a couple years now considered one of the best catchers in the game, and this year I think he was the best. This year in 139 games, he hit .276 to go along with 22 home runs, 84 runs driven in, 21 stolen bases, and an .820 OPS. On top of that, he also had a 6.5 WAR and is one of the best defensive catchers in baseball as he had 11 defensive runs saved. Realmuto really did it all for the Phillies this year. He was one of the most important players on the team. When you're a catcher who has the ability to hit for a solid average and hit 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases as well as having very good defense, you are definitely going to be considered one of the best. As for an honorable mention, I have Adley Rutschman. Moving on to first base, I have Paul Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt put together a really good season this year as he's most likely going to win the National League MVP award. In 151 games, he hit .317 to go along with 35 home runs, 115 runs driven in, 7 stolen bases, and a league-best .981 OPS. He also had a 7.8 WAR and 2 defensive runs saved over at first base. He was one of the main reasons why the Cardinals won the National League Central this year. And like I mentioned earlier, it looks like Goldschmidt is finally going to win that illustrious MVP award that I think he should have got many years ago. The Cardinals season ended a lot earlier than they would have liked, but Goldschmidt was still very impressive this season, and I have him as the best first baseman of 2022. As for a few honorable mentions, I have Freddie Freeman and Pete Alonso. Getting on to second base, I have Tommy Edman. Now, second base might be one of the more weaker positions we look at today, but that's to take nothing away from Edman's 2022 campaign. He played in 153 games in which he hit .265 to go along with 13 home runs, 57 runs driven in, 32 stolen bases, and a .725 OPS. He also had a 6.3 WAR and was one of the best defenders in all of baseball as he had 18 defensive runs saved over at second base. He's one of the most underrated players in all of baseball today, and I think it's because he gets overshadowed by the other superstars on his team in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. Edman is all around a great player, and I have him as the best second baseman of 2022. As for an honorable mention, I have Andres Gimenez, who I was very close to putting on the list. Moving on to shortstop, I have Francisco Lindor. Lindor struggled last year in his first season in New York, but this year he looked like the Lindor of old. He played in all but one game in which he hit .270 to go along with 26 home runs, 107 runs driven in, 16 stolen bases, and a .788 OPS. He also posted a 5.4 WAR and was one of the most valuable players on the 100-win New York Mets. Now, one flaw in Lindor's game this season was his defense as he had -2 defensive runs saved. But with how good Lindor was offensively and how important overall he was to the Mets, I think he still edges out the other shortstops as the best shortstop of 2022. As for an honorable mention, I have Trey Turner. Getting on to third base, I have Jose Ramirez. Ramirez did what he's done over the past couple years, and that's play like a superstar. In 157 games, Ramirez hit .280 to go along with 29 home runs, 126 runs driven in, 20 stolen bases, and an .869 OPS. He also had a 6.0 WAR and had 2 defensive runs saved over at third base, meaning he was above average. Ramirez actually used to be a pretty bad defensive third baseman, but throughout his career, he's really worked on his defense, and at this point, I would say he's an above average defender. So when you have a solid defender over at third base who puts up the numbers that Ramirez does offensively, you're going to find yourself with one of the best players in all of baseball. As for a few honorable mentions, I have Nolan Arenado and Manny Machado, who I was very, very close to putting on the list. Getting on to left field, I have Kyle Schwarber. Schwarber in his first season in Philadelphia put up the best season of his career. He played in 155 games in which he hit .218 to go along with 46 home runs, 94 runs driven in, 10 stolen bases, and an .827 OPS. Schwarber was the leadoff man for Philadelphia all season long, and while he might not be your prototypical 300 hitter in the leadoff spot, he did exactly what Philadelphia asked him to, and I think he was the perfect fit for the leadoff role in that lineup. Now, defensively, Schwarber is definitely not good. He had -14 defensive runs saved, so that's a big flaw in his game right now, but with the offensive numbers he put up, I still think he was the best left fielder. I don't want to take anything away from Schwarber's great season, but left field is one of the more weaker positions we're going to be looking at today. As for a few honorable mentions, I have Ian Happ and Stephen Kwan. Moving on to center field, I have Aaron Judge. Now I know a lot of people are going to come at me and say he's not a center fielder, but this year he did play the majority of his games in center field, and we're just looking at 2022. So for the purpose of this video, Judge is in fact a center fielder. But it really doesn't matter, as Judge was the best player regardless of what position you put him at. In 157 games, Judge hit .311 to go along with 62 home runs, 131 runs driven in, 16 stolen bases, an 11.11 OPS, and a 10.6 WAR. He led all of baseball in home runs, RBIs, OPS, WAR, and he nearly won the Triple Crown. Judge also had 3 defensive runs saved in center field, so he was an above-average center fielder. Judge put together a historic season, and he was far and away the best center fielder in 2022. As for an honorable mention, I have Mike Trout. Moving on to right field, I have Mookie Betts. Betts has probably been the best right fielder in baseball for a couple years now, and this year was no different. He played in 142 games in which he hit .269 to go along with 35 home runs, 82 runs driven in, 12 stolen bases, and an .873 OPS. On top of that, he also had a 6.4 WAR and had 15 defensive runs saved over in right field. So on top of his MVP offensive numbers, he's probably going to win another Gold Glove in right field. Betts is all around one of the best players in baseball today. I really do think he could be argued as a top 3 player. He's one of my favorite players, and he's really, really good. As for an honorable mention, I have the still very underrated Kyle Tucker. Moving on to DH, I have Yordan Alvarez. Alvarez, simply put, is one of the best offensive players in the world today. This season, he played in 135 games in which he hit .306 to go along with 37 home runs, 97 runs driven in, and a 10.19 OPS. He also posted a 6.8 WAR, and if it weren't for Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, Alvarez most likely would have won the MVP award this year. He has some of the best power in baseball today. He's shown that this postseason. He's been dominant. He's just been hitting everything that's been coming his way, and he's one of the most valuable Astros. So to go along with his superhuman power, he is also one of the most clutch players in the game. He's a really fun player to watch, and I think he was the best DH of 2022. Now for an honorable mention, I have Shohei Ohtani. Now moving over to the pitchers, the best starting pitcher of 2022, I have Sandy Alcantara. This is one that's definitely a toss-up. I could see a lot of people going with Justin Verlander, and I really wouldn't argue that. The reason why I have Alcantara above Verlander is because he pitched 50 plus more innings than Verlander, and he pitched 20 plus more innings than any other pitcher in baseball. So I really have to take that into account. I think that is such a big difference maker. He basically made 3 to 4 more starts than anyone else. All in all, in 229 innings, Alcantara posted a 2.28 ERA to go along with 207 strikeouts and a .98 WHIP. He also posted an 8.1 WAR, which was far and away the best of any pitcher. So again, I can definitely see why people would pick Justin Verlander for this spot, but start to finish, I think Alcantara was the best starting pitcher of 2022. And this really goes without being said, but an honorable mention is Justin Verlander. And finally, getting on to the best relief pitcher of 2022, I have Edwin Diaz. Diaz dominated all year long, as in 62 innings he locked down 32 saves to go along with a 1.31 ERA, 118 strikeouts, and a .9 WHIP. All season long, it seemed like hitters just couldn't seem to touch Diaz, as he basically struck out 2 batters every inning. He was a huge reason why the Mets won 100 plus games in the regular season, and they wouldn't have been close to as good without him. He's had his ups and downs in the past, but this year, Diaz was undoubtedly the best reliever in all of baseball. As for an honorable mention, I have Emmanuel Clase. So there you have my rankings for the best player at every position in 2022. Let me know what you guys think down below, anything you agree on or disagree on. As always, I want to thank you guys again so much for watching and continuing to support, and I'll see you next time.